A very warm welcome to this episode of Paradise Talks. I'm Emma Bartholomew, and today we focus on TV, specifically the TV streaming wars, asking the question, are we drowning in premium TV streaming platforms? It doesn't take a genius to conclude that the TV industry, and specifically the way we watch TV, has changed dramatically over the last decade. It's all about on demand, the streamers. And just with pretty much every other aspect of our lives, yes, COVID has had an impact on that too. We've all been stuck at home and we've all been watching more. Across Q1 2020, Netflix was the UK's most popular streaming service, reporting more than 13 million subscriptions, while Amazon Prime had 7.9 million and Now TV 1.6 million. As an audience, we're hooked. But does that give production companies and streaming platforms carte blanche to churn out any old content? Or does it drive them all to produce ever higher quality shows in a fiercely competitive market to satisfy our greedy TV appetites? I'll ask today's guests for their expert, honest thoughts and opinions as key players in the world of TV, giving us their insider's take on all things streaming. A very warm welcome to our guests for this episode. We talked to Jamie Hall, COO of the scripted division at Pulse Films, one of the industry's hottest production companies, responsible for the likes of Sky's Gangs of London and two standout Netflix documentaries, Bikram and The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann, to mention a few amongst a phenomenal body of work. And Tom Dodds, Relationship Director, Tech, Media and Telecoms at Barclays. Interestingly, the only high street bank offering funding to streaming video on-demand production, who'll shed some light on how they help make TV production happen through essential financial backing. Welcome both of you, and thank you so much for being with me on Paradise Talks.
Thanks, Emma. Excited to be here.
Great. I think we're going to have an interesting conversation today, and I come at this from somebody who works in the creative sector, but not specifically in TV. So you'll have to forgive my ignorance if I ask a very silly question, but you can guarantee somebody in our audience might have that same question in their heads. So I thought we'd start with the concept of original content, which is so key, it seems, in my research around this topic. A recent Deloitte study discovered that one of the top priorities for viewers when choosing to pay for streaming services is, unsurprisingly, I guess, the access to original or exclusive content. According to their research, 57% of users gave this as their main motivation, which I have to admit, maybe even a bit less than I had in my mind. But amongst millennials, it's even more important, with 71% of those surveyed giving this as the biggest reason for their choice to subscribe. So how do the streamers keep up with this demand for exclusive content? Is there a constant price and turf war amongst acquisition teams? Jamie, I might put that one to you first.
Sure, thanks, Emma. I'm not sure there's a price or turf war, because I think a lot of the different platforms do different things for different markets. But there is definitely, from the production side, there's definitely a huge demand and huge escalation of demand for talent, both behind and in front of the camera. And I think what we're seeing from where I'm sitting is that there is a huge amount of pressure on securing unique talent and unique voices that deliver content for a global audience. And that inevitably, and talent, as we all know, talent is scarce, and that will inevitably lead to inflation for that talent. So it is incredibly competitive, but it's a good place for all of us to be in at the moment.
Absolutely, and that drive for talent is a really interesting kind of insight into this whole process. Tom, from your point of view, just to kind of latch on to what Jamie's commented there, would would the presence of talent and the kind of however prolific talent might be within one production or another, would that really sway a financial backer's decision as to whether to fund a project or not? Or is it a more creative decision than that?
I think it's a mixture of the two. I think, essentially when a project is being put together, the main funder really is the streamer or the broadcaster or there might be a distribution company involved, and those guys will always like the idea of a key piece of talent, which is easier for them to market than a completely new voice. And that kind of goes back to what Jamie was saying. It's a virtuous circle of talent inflation. A lot of the streamers are closing in on A-list Hollywood talent as a way of trying to boost subscriber numbers and get good content on their platform. So, if you're an A-list actor or writer or director these days, you've got more options than you ever had and can command a better fee. So I think that does fold into it, but I think still, just like Jamie said, it's about having exclusive voices, and those voices don't necessarily need to be, based off existing talent. They can be new voices, and often you'll see streamers, and I think Netflix is pretty good at this in creating new talent and giving it the opportunity to flourish, and often by kind of targeting their content at different parts of their subscriber base, they can effectively create new talent and create exclusive content without having to spend a fortune. I think it's been fairly well publicized that something like the rights to Friends have cost Netflix a lot of money. And a lot of people watch Friends on Netflix, but I'd probably wager that they're only watching it because it's there. And actually what's driving the engagement with these streamers is the exclusive content. And that can be something that the streamers can kind of create themselves, rather than having to rely on existing kind of library content.
Yeah, so interesting. One of my favorite things as a viewer is feeling like I'm discovering some new talent because they're being showcased in a new production. I find that really, really exciting. Jamie, was there something that you wanted to add? I've got one more question on the universal nature of talent, but I'd love to get your further thoughts on that one.
I think what we're also seeing is particularly streamers. I mean, it's something the US studios have done, but streamers particularly now are signing up talent to exclusive deals to protect that supply of content to them. And obviously that's, as a producer, that's quite challenging because you want to have access to the broadest range of talent possible. But I think it identifies how crucial, talent is to those platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I come from the music industry side of the creative sector, and the beautiful thing about music is that it can be universal because it breaks through languages and cultural barriers and age and so on, as can TV. But I guess maybe talent is slightly less universal depending on language and depending on cultural expectations and so on. Is that true, or is that a misconception from my point of view as a viewer?
I think it has been in the past, but I think you've identified an area that's actually a really exciting part of the industry at the moment, and I think it's another part of the industry that we're going to see sort of a next wave of growth in, which will be foreign, what we quaintly consider foreign language, but non-English speaking language crossing over into English language speaking territories. I mean, we've already started to see it with sort of shows like Gomorrah and some of the, and obviously the Scandi crime noir drama has crossed over, but I think we're going to see that more and more. And also, with these platforms being truly global, there's a greater opportunity for talent from non-English language speaking territories who've not had access to, the commercial world has not existed to be able to distribute their content as widely around the world. I think with the platforms we've got now, we will see that more and more, which you would hope would increase the pool of talent available.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that with the Netflix series Criminal, that you simultaneously get released in English, French, Spanish, German, as far as I know. I may be missing a few languages, but I think if you get hooked on a show and then you think, oh no, I'm coming to the end, but oh look, I can watch it in a different language, kind of opens up. You're in familiar setting. You're not going to get too nervous about the scene and what's going on, but you're, without even realizing it, you're watching a subtitled show, which is a really nice breakthrough, I think. Probably having had the ground laid by those Scandi series, which is a great place to be when it comes to universality. Now we're in undoubtedly tough times. Nobody could question that, but there are some healthy trends coming through, particularly in the UK industry, at an excruciatingly tough time for the creative industries overall. In that streaming really does bring us healthy, positive news. Netflix will have spent, for example, over $1 billion or £750 million thereabouts on specifically UK productions by the end of 2020, shooting more than 50 TV shows and films here this year. I wonder, Tom, I might come to you on this one first. Do you think this is a trend that's set to continue, with the UK continuing to benefit financially, economically from the streaming boom?
Yeah, I think all the signs are looking really positive, and that's what I would expect. I mean, Netflix is obviously a huge investor in the UK kind of production industry. They're probably the streamer that is spending the most amount of money in the UK, but the UK production sector it's something we're very good at. It's been growing for years, and I'd like to think would carry on, despite a few headwinds around COVID and Brexit and those kind of things. But I think from the point of view of the streamers and other kind of US broadcasters, I think it's not just the fact that we're great at the mechanics of making it and we've got great talent and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. I think they find UK content interesting. From an American point of view, I think, the kind of dramas and shows that we make are, still a little bit esoteric and just a bit different and unique from what they're used to. And I think that goes down well. And there's a good few examples of things like that, like Fleabag, I think, for example, it's very British. And it's something that the US US networks or streamers could never make, but it's popular. So we're good at making stuff. There's good tax incentives and schemes in this country. There are tax incentives for productions all around the world, but I think the UK one is easy to obtain, and it's quite valuable, and it's driving lots of interest from the streamers and the big US studios. And I think the other thing is that I think we're frankly quite cheap in terms of making content as well. If a US film studio or a streamer was trying to compare, the cost of producing something in the UK versus in LA, where it's a little bit more unionized and just the general wages and things like that are higher, then we're seen as pretty cost effective, especially with the sterling dollar rate being what it is at the moment. So there's a combination of a few things. I think the groundwork is there for a lot more success in the future,
which is really great news. And Jamie, this is a kind of marketing question that just popped into my head as Tom was speaking then, about how a UK production company might stand out on a truly global marketplace. Is it still a question of kind of doing the rounds and schmoozing at fairs like MIPCOM and MIPTV and other equivalents? Or is that really a thing of the past? Is it now just kind of being the best in show, if you like, and building a reputation for yourself, and everything's done remotely, and you don't have to do so much of that face-to-face schmoozing and showcasing now?
The markets are those big markets have less relevance now for us as a especially for my area, which is the scripted side of the business. And, the timelines for us developing a project don't need to fall into going to a market and selling it. Personal relationships with buyers are absolutely intrinsic to selling a show and getting it produced. So there is when we can all start flying again, there is a lot of air miles that are required in terms of visiting, potential buyers in the US, Europe, and the UK. And also now with the scale of the shows we're producing, it's unlikely you can finance a show from just one territory. You are looking to finance it across multiple territories. So in the answer to your question, your work is always your calling card. So you need to be making the best version of the show that you can make, and success leads to success.
Yeah, that's something that I hear in creative conversations across all creative sectors, the idea of just create the best of what you do and the rest will follow, rather than trying to create to fit a particular purpose or whatever it might be. And then the flea bags, as Tom mentioned earlier, the flea bags of this world will find their place across the globe, which is a brilliant thing for UK production. But the process of TV production itself is something that's quite fascinating to us laymen. It's a seemingly glamorous mystery to most of us in the audience. But realistically, and you've just confirmed this with the kind of trawling around the world, to buyers and so on, which is after the production process itself. The actual production process, presumably, is months and months and sometimes years of hard graft. How far ahead of broadcast that we might watch on release on a streaming platform, how far in advance would the average TV show go into production, Jamie?
I think the first thing to make clear is that TV production is rarely glamorous.
I knew you'd say that.
The last time Tom and I met on set was in a multi-story car park in Tottenham. So
yeah, and there was no food left for me either when it was lunchtime. I was too late, so I had to go and buy my own food. So there you go.
I'm so sorry, and we've got no catering. We're just sitting behind screens today, so we can't even be glamorous ourselves.
The life of a poor banker.
Exactly, that's what we all think about bankers. You poor things. So Jamie, okay, multi-story car park, very unglamorous. We get that. Yeah.
The actual production process is pretty intense and it goes on for a long time and is long hours and all the rest of it. But it's a fantastic industry to be involved in. I think the average timescales for getting a production from sort of original idea through to actually completing it depends on so many different factors. The scripting process is often the process that takes the longest period, because at that point you have not very high overhead, so you can take the time to get the scripts absolutely right. And if you don't get the scripts right, it's like building a house. If you don't get the architecture plans right before you go and build it, then you're in real trouble. So, I probably the fastest project I've been involved in sort of initial idea to completion is 18 months, but I would say that's unusual. It's probably sort of 2 to 3 years, and some projects have taken 6 years. It really every production has its own sort of journey.
Yeah, I can well imagine. I guess it's like writing a book that, one book could take somebody a fairly short amount of time, and then another is a lifetime's work, which is so admirable and tenacious and incredible.
And obviously a lot of heavy lifting is done on the first series. And if you're lucky enough to get a returning series, then theoretically, your second, third, fourth, fifth series should be a lot more straightforward, because you've established the process and the building blocks of what the show is.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. And so, from that moment of conception, the light bulb moment, would writers and producers have the audience in mind, or would they create what they want to create, what they feel passionate about and hope it flies? Or does that really depend on who's commissioning the show and kind of what's at stake? Is that a naive question, maybe?
Where we personally start from is, we always start with the talent and what stories do they want to tell, and we then look at what can we bring as producers that is additive to the production, and the writing process with them. There are times when broadcasters put a call out and say that we're really missing a certain genre from our schedules. The danger then is that everybody runs off in that direction, and you end up with 10 projects all in the same genre. So generally, I would say we start with great talent, understanding what stories they want to tell, how can we help them tell that stories, and what can we bring as producers that is additive to that process.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, you mentioned it yourself there, just kind of trying to avoid not going down the road of creating a plethora of the same genre. Sometimes as an audience member, it can feel like there really is no more room left on any platform for yet another iteration of a show about housewives, or please let's not have another crime drama to choose from because there's just too many. Would you kind of proactively put the brakes on and think we're reaching saturation point? I mean, we're going to be coming on to talking about whether we've reached saturation point or could ever reach saturation point with the number of streaming platforms themselves. But within a genre, do you think you would proactively do that and say, okay, we need to stop and we need to look at another type of TV because
we're not really as prescriptive as that? We would be. I think Gangs of London is a great example. There has been a huge amount of gang shows over the years, but when we're looking at it, we're looking at what can we do that is unique and brings a fresh take on telling a genre story such as that, and that's the approach we take it. I think it would be dangerous to say there are too many crime stories around, because also you're taking a snapshot of the market at the moment, and if we start developing an idea now, it's not going to hit the screens for probably 3 years. So, you're trying to second guess what is coming down the line in 3 years' time. I think our approach is, if we're going to do a crime story or a certain genre, how can we do it in a unique way with amazing talent that approaches the genre in a very different and exciting way as compared to what's been done previously.
Yeah,
I think that's what the.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's what the broadcasters want, right? These genres exist because they're popular and people like watching crime stuff. They like watching programs about housewives, even if some other people don't. But what the broadcaster wants, what the streamer wants, is a production company to take that genre and do something different with it and unique with it, and something that puts it above the rest of the shows, that are around it within that same genre. And that's what Gangs did so well. With the way it depicted the kind of the action and the violence, frankly, in that show, and kind of brought the international kind of crime syndicate type ideas into London. I just thought was very, very original, and that's why Sky and that's why Sky bought into it. So genre stuff is not a problem. It's just you just have to try and do something different with it. You just don't want another murder mystery program about a cop who's got an alcohol problem, because we've seen them lots of times before. But there's nothing wrong with crime dramas or sci-fi programs or whatever.
No, absolutely.
It's about doing something unique with them.
Absolutely, I love that. That's the beauty of the creative challenge. And as a viewer, please let me beg any production company or financial backer of said production companies, do not stop making crime shows, because we do love them, but both scripted and non. I mean, I thought the work that was done on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, for example, was a really interesting take on a story that we all thought had been totally rinsed for every possible angle. And then by stretching it out across so many episodes, you see so many different facets to the story, and that's not even a scripted show. So such a challenge, but definitely being addressed really effectively and amazingly, and so powerful. The fact that there's so many iterations of one genre is fascinating. Now, COVID to use a swear word, has cursed so much of us, our creative sectors, including TV production, which was on hold, of course, in the days of serious lockdown. How far down the road back to full production are we now? Tom, I'm going to come to you on that one first, just because I think you bring an interesting point of view in terms of, who's coming to you with ideas and stuff. Do you think people are brimming with new projects?
Yeah, sure. I think my kind of helicopter view of this is that when I talk to clients and companies in the sector is that, see, first lockdown stopped everything for about 3-4 months, but everyone's been working extremely hard to get back to work, and subsequent lockdowns and tiered systems or whatever have not stopped productions progressing. Obviously, it sounds like it's extremely tough to get stuff done these days with all the protocols and the testing and the social distancing, and it just sounds like a nightmare for everyone involved. So I'm only tangentially kind of see that stuff, but the sector is back to work, and I think a lot of the production companies spent the time during that lockdown period, developing shows from scratch, or progressing the development of some projects they had. And I think a lot of my clients seem to have good commissioning momentum into the new year because although they weren't making the stuff they'd already been asked to make by the broadcasters and the streamers, there's a clear supply side issue in the market, and these guys are still hungry for content, and people are watching content more than they ever were, and they've got nothing else to do. So people are getting back to work, and it feels to me generally across the board like everyone's looking pretty optimistically at 2021 as a way of getting been able to start producing commissions that they've been gaining this year, and also getting back to resuming the productions of the projects that were stalled this year. So it sounds, my kind of helicopter view is that it's pretty positive actually.
That's really refreshing, healthy news to hear. Jamie, how about you? How do you feel from a production company view?
I do. I mean, I think it just shows how remarkably ingenious the TV industry and film industry is in the UK, in that we have adapted so quickly to such different conditions that we have to work in. It has, it will bear some scars on the industry for quite a while. And, I think we have to take a very close look at the way we staff most of our productions. We are almost 100% staffed by freelancers, and they've had a really, really tough year. And I know very sadly that we've lost some of them out of the industry because, the peripatetic nature of them earning and being employed has been too much to bear during this process. But I think the industry is bouncing back. I think there are some challenges. We've obviously got vaccines coming through, but I think COVID protocols for shooting are going to be around for quite a while into next year. And with that comes increased costs in terms of production. And I also think, we're starting to see it now, but I think we'll really see it in January when we've got shows that had been on hiatus because of COVID are coming back and trying to complete. We've got new productions coming through, and we've got broadcasters and platforms desperate to fill their schedules because they had a period where no content was being produced. So I think we're going to see real challenges in terms of crew being available and talent both in front of and behind the camera being available for this demand. I mean, it's a enviable problem to have given where we've all been, but I think it is a challenge to the industry that we need to look a good hard look at and see what we can do to make the industry as sustainable as possible, and also to continue the rapid growth that we've seen in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. Something that you mentioned there, Jamie, is to remember those freelancers who had tried desperately to hang on and then just couldn't hang on any longer and have had to look across different horizons to find some kind of income during this, what must have been an absolutely desperate time for them. So I think,
and let's not forget that there's a whole ecosystem which feeds into television and film, and that's that's theatre, that's live events, and those guys are even worse placed than we are. They goodness knows when theatre will be back on its feet, but we can't just look at ourselves as a single entity. There is a whole ecosystem, especially in the UK. And going back to what Tom was saying earlier, the reason we produce such unique content that is different to the rest of the world is because we have this amazing heritage in theatre and writing that leads into, that develops authored voices that then transitions into TV and film. And that's something we really have to take a good hard look at and protect as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been reflecting recently that, we have this term creative sector, and there's been some pretty awful things suggested, like, oh, just go and retrain and you'll be fine, which it's clearly, when you've got a lifetime's work behind you is not something to have to hear. But we think of creativity and the creative sector as being based on maybe loosely the arts or, something slightly abstract like that. In fact, it's based on sheer hard work, determination, tenacity, innovation and resourcefulness and vision. And I guess if we can all keep a faith in that, a collective sort of solidarity and faith in that, and help each other out towards some sort of light at the end of the tunnel with all this work that is going to need to be done by somebody, then hopefully that can be a good news story to look forward to. But as you say, it's going to take some time because the restrictions are going to be in place. We can't say that a vaccine in the pipeline is a miracle. So there's definitely a lot to think about and a lot to consider. But none of this would be possible. None of the production we're talking about, none of the potential opportunities that we're talking about for next year would be possible without the finance. Let's be honest. Good old bankers, Tom. This is where you come in. At what stage, again, this is from a layman's point of view, at what stage in the production or concept process would a production company approach the likes of Barclays? I say the likes of, but you are actually the only high street bank. Is that true, or is that just bad research on my point?
I think it is true. There are, of course, other banks that will put finance into the production sector, but none of the other kind of main 4 or 5 high street banks that you could name or see a branch on your high street would do it apart from us.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of how this works, for banks, lending is low reward and therefore needs to be low risk. So our involvement in a show, we're not enjoying any of the profits of the show, or we're not getting distribution income. All we want is our loan to be repaid and then a little bit of interest for the in return for giving the loan in the first place. So
as well.
And some catering every now and then, if I get invited to stuff.
Just not in a multi-story car park. Sorry.
So the real risk really is financial risk is being made by the broadcasters or streamers or distribution companies that are actually financing the program. So what we do is we bridge the timing difference between having to pay out the costs for the cast and the crew and the freelancers and set build and anything that needs to that's required to make the program. So bridging the timing distance between those costs and when the money comes in from broadcasters or the distribution companies, just depending on their own payment terms and the way they want to fund the program from a timing point of view. And often with large projects, drama projects, there's a tax incentive that the producer can claim from the government, and those tax incentives don't come back from the government until the production is finished and the spend can be identified and presented to the revenue. So that's where banks like Barclays can get involved. It's really just about kind of bridging those timing differences. There are other kind of bespoke lenders and other banks that will get involved at an earlier stage. There's this concept of gap financing where a bank might help to cover the overall kind of cost of the budget of a show, but they would need to be very comfortable that the show could sell internationally in order for the financier to be repaid. So generally, we're doing the last part, and we're doing the least risky part, and the bulk of the financing, if you like, the cost of the production is coming from the streamers or the broadcaster or the distribution company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Jamie, from a production company's point of view, how much influence would you say that whoever's providing the finance has over the overall production? Is there any creative influence, or is that kind of a no-no?
In TV, that it's a no-no. When you say finance, I mean, if you mean banks and sort of commercial lenders, then they have no input into the editorial. Not that I'm saying Tom wouldn't.
Yeah, well, nor should I, because the film snob in me would probably start turning down the odd transaction. But no, we don't, unless it's like a snuff film or something that might give us some reputational risk as a bank. We just keep away from all that stuff.
I mean, in film, it is more common for investors to have sort of influence and a right of say over cuts on films and things like that. But in TV, generally not. No, I mean, obviously, if your financier is a platform or a broadcaster, then they have a huge say on what you're producing and delivering to them.
Yeah, which makes absolute sense. I'm just relieved to hear that my local branch of Barclays will not be dictating the script of the next hit TV show. That's I'm kind of relieved, I have to say. But Tom, more seriously, in terms of the availability of funding, how much financial support, whether through banks like Barclays or other sources of funding, how much is available for aspiring, emerging TV writing talent, for example, and producers out there who are really dreaming of seeing their work streaming into global homes? Is that a pipe dream, or is something available to them?
Not really. No, not in the context of an aspiring, script writer or aspiring showrunner. Unfortunately, I think what I tend to say to people I bump into is that you should, if you are an aspiring, showrunner of a program, then you should try and anchor yourself into a production company with, an established production company with some credibility, because, production companies are always looking for new talent and new voices, because they need to be able to, pitch new and unique and interesting ideas to broadcasters. And broadcasters tend to want the comfort of a established producer involved, so that they know the program can actually get mechanically made, because as we've just been talking about, they're very complicated things to complete, so for an individual a newcomer in the industry to pitch directly to a broadcaster, that's the wrong way of doing it. You really need to find a good production company to help you on that journey, and I'm sure that production company would have good feedback in terms of script writing and edits and all the things that you need to do to be able to get it to an acceptable standard, if you like.
A large part of what we do as producers at Pulse is not just the physical production. I mean, that's really important to us, but we have a huge amount of time and energy and a team of people that is devoted to just developing ideas with writers and working through ideas with writers and working on scripts with writers to get them to the point where we feel we can sell them, or we can develop them onto the next stage. So I completely agree with Tom, and is that it is incredibly rare for an independent sole writer to go and pitch and sell a show on their own without having a producer or a studio behind them.
Yeah, it sounds collectively like you've given everybody some very wise words of advice there. And to be honest, that's no surprise. I guess sometimes when you have a burning idea in your mind that you'd love to show on the screens of the world, you feel a little bit impatient, but there's always a process to go through, and there's always more experienced people to learn from. So yeah,
get yourself an agent. That's the other thing. That's a really important part of your toolkit as a writer.
Yeah. Again, very, very wise words. Now, without all of this nurturing of emerging talent and the next generation of brilliant filmmakers, producers, writers, whoever they may be, we wouldn't have the choice that we have. But the audience will always demand choice. But we do all know that very familiar feeling of now scrolling through hundreds of titles and still somehow miraculously finding nothing to watch, which is ridiculous. But maybe we are blinded by choice. Could there ever be such a thing as too much choice, too many streaming platforms to browse? I'm going to come to you, Jamie. I guess coming from the voice of Pulse, you would say, no, there can never be enough. We want some work. Thank you very much.
There is a part of me that, yes, as a business person, there is a part of me who is thinking that. But as a consumer, I find it as bewildering as I think you do in terms of the amount of choice out there. And before coming on here, I was just thinking rather worryingly through how many subscriptions we've got in my house, and I think we've probably got 6 subscriptions now. Wow. To various different, because obviously we have Disney Plus because the kids love it. We've got Netflix, we've got Amazon, and various other ones, and it seems on a daily basis we're being bombarded with new and different offerings. And it still feels to me, and maybe I'm getting this wrong and I haven't noticed yet, but it still seems to me that no one's really cracked the algorithm that once you've seen one thing, it gives you something new and fresh that you would be interested in. All I seem to get offered up is something very similar to the thing I've just watched, which as a human, that's not what really interests me. I want to have that diversity of content being presented to me, and that's what is so beautiful and unique about PSBs and their scheduling systems, in that you get presented with this array of content that is very diverse and very different, and I suppose because there's only sort of 3 or 4 channels, you can choose them quite easily. But when you go to sort of one platform, and as you say, you're presented with this huge array of content, it's incredibly hard to find your way through that system.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, not from a business point of view, but from a consumer's point of view, you don't necessarily have to name names of providers, but are there any subscriptions in your household that you're thinking of ditching? Like numbers-wise? Like
ditching?
one or 2 that I could live without paying this fee every month, or are you happy with what you've got?
I'm trying to think how many I've got now. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... I think I've got 7 or 8. Wow. They're all, so the tyranny of choice, as Jamie was talking about, is true in my household as well, for me personally. I think there probably are a couple that I could shave off or don't use as much as I would like to, but I've got a mixture of usual Netflix and Amazons and a couple of kind of snobby film services as well. So I do feel like I've got a good spread of stuff to watch. It's just time and effort in doing so, and I think the streamers do need to think about user interface a bit more, and trying to find a way of selling the content that they've got and making it appealing to people using it. It does often feel it's just rows of tiles, isn't it, of film posters or TV posters.
It must be, Tom. It must be inevitable that we're going to see some type of consolidation or some, probably failures of some services just because they don't find their market. Wouldn't you say?
I think so, definitely. I think there's a lot of services coming out in the States, and it feels like every network, wants to have its own subscriber service, but surely most of those won't work. And there will be some consolidation.
I would agree. I mean, it'll be an interesting space to watch. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with all of these, I think you're right there, Tom, about, every single network seems to be bringing out their own premium streaming offering. But does that range of on-demand TV options mean that providers will be kept on their toes pricing-wise? I'm talking subscription pricing-wise, or is there a risk that some of the more mature platforms get complacent about audience loyalty and they just keep putting those tiles up row after row after row. They don't really think about that imaginatively, and they don't think about their subscription pricing? Or do you think it's a permanent churning of thought and strategy behind the scenes?
Well, I think Netflix could start to be complacent. I don't think they are, but I think they could be to an extent because they've got first mover advantage. And the great thing about a subscription business model, whether it's a gym or a magazine subscription or a Netflix, is that once you start paying for it, you forget about it, don't you? And even if you're not using it, you're still giving them the money. But I don't think there isn't much room for any of these services to be complacent. And it's tough. And I think they have to keep investing in new content. It doesn't necessarily have to be expensive content. It doesn't have to keep spending hundreds of millions of dollars on rights to Friends, but you need stuff that people want to watch and engages people and sets you apart. So I think that it's difficult for Netflix at the moment in that they've been so disruptive in the industry, and when they started, they were a great source of revenue for a Disney, in that they were paying a nice premium on library content that Disney already had, whether it's Marvel Studios or whatever. And then the studio started to realize that Netflix are eating their lunch. So they've started to pull their content back into their own platforms, which does spread the content all over the place and make it more difficult for consumers who probably wanted to go into Netflix or Amazon because it's a nice aggregated kind of library of all kinds of different content, and it's worth the small amount of money compared to a Sky subscription, Yeah. So if you pull all the content across different platforms, in the end, I think some of them are going to have to fail because there's only so many services people will want to subscribe to or could even think about. So it might go back the other way.
So I think it'll also be interesting to see whether any of those platforms start taking advertising as well, which obviously, I don't know of any that do at the moment, because that's obviously a very obvious revenue stream in addition to the subscription. But I also think the thing that really keeps them keen is that they've got real-time data as to what's going on with their subscriptions. It's not like the PSB model that are looking for sort of quarterly ad results. I think that's really, really valuable to them.
So I can't believe this, but we somehow have raced through our conversation and we're coming to an end. You've both given us so much insight and so much food for thought. I'm going to be thinking a little bit more carefully when I choose what I'm watching, I have to say, at home, and I might be shaving off some of those subscriptions myself. I've got two final questions.
I would really discourage you from doing that. I think you need as much content in your life as possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we continue to be mostly at home, I really do agree with you on that one. But just two questions. One is, are you both bingers, or do you have the patience to watch like an episode a week or a day, or what's your kind of consumption rate? I put Jamie, go first on that one.
My consumption rate is very poor, but that's mainly because I have a young family and don't have the spare time to watch it. If we are able to carve out time, then yeah, we'll watch 2 or 3 episodes in a night at the weekend if we've got it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty healthy. I mean, there are bingers who will go all night. I think when you have children in the equation, that's just not an option.
No,
but
it's not a good mix.
No, probably not. Tom, what about you? Binger or with some patience?
So I also have small children, so I'm time poor in that regard. But okay. I do prefer binging, and certainly pre-children, I used to binge. I don't really like watching stuff like on a weekly basis. I just don't feel like I'm pulled into the story in the way that I can when I binge. So
yeah,
I used to something like Game of Thrones. I used to just wait until the whole thing finished and then binge it over a weekend. But I got annoyed because the program became so popular that I couldn't do that and avoid any news or spoilers for 6 weeks while someone while I waited for all the episodes to come out. So but yeah, I would rather binge.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Very interesting to get the insider's view on that one. And maybe just a final word from each of you on any intel or just projection that you would have about what the next big viewing trend might be. And it could be scripted or non. I guess, Jamie, if I'm coming to you, it's going to be scripted. But any thoughts on that?
I think I would be very foolish to try and predict what the next big trend is going to be. Mm-hmm. I think the only prediction I would make is it's probably going to be not what we all expect it to be. And that again is just the beauty of our industry, in that we are constantly evolving and iterating and developing great new content for that huge audience out there.
Yeah, great. I love that sneaky answer. Expect the unexpected, nicely avoided. Are you a politician by any chance?
I couldn't possibly comment.
Nice. And Tom, are you gonna follow the party line there and say no? I'm not giving you a prediction.
Well, I might come up with a couple of predictions, but I don't know whether they'll be true or not. But I'm interested in this idea that what Disney's doing with Star Wars and Marvel, where they're trying to blur the lines between TV and film. So they're using that IP and they're exploiting it in different ways. And I think you're going to have these kind of shared universes where, whatever the next Marvel film that you watch doesn't make any sense if you haven't watched the TV show that goes along with it. That seems interesting to me. Whether it will work or not, I don't know. But I think there's a drive from Disney to try and make that work.
Yeah.
And I also think that you will probably continue to see the kind of micro targeting of content. So in that, your Netflixes and your Amazons, they know the demographic of the people that are watching their shows. And I think they're getting better at this. So they'll probably start to make content that is, focused directly at different demographics and different types of users, subscribers. Mm-hmm. So you'll probably find that the viewing, what a teenager will see on his or her Netflix, interface will be different from an old person like me. So, so I think you'll probably start to see more of that.
Very interesting. Well, thank you both. You've given us some real food for thought today, and sadly, that does bring us to the end of this episode of Paradise Talks. But there's just time for me to thank my brilliant guests, and I should say insightful guests, because you certainly were that. Jamie Hall from Pulse Films and Tom Dodds from Barclays. Thank you both so much. I'd also like to thank our producer Luke and Talia Levine, who is from Broadcast and has helped so much in putting this episode together. So thank you to Talia. We'll be back soon with another episode taking a fresh industry insider's view of another strand of the creative sector.
To discover more about the agency and Paradise Talks, visit www.paradise.london.